I never thought I'd say this, but getting locked in a room with a stranger was one of the most awkward first dates I've ever had. And no, I'm not talking about a bad Tinder swipe that turned into a dinner disaster. This was different. Way different. It started when I signed up for that escape room challenge on a whim, hoping it'd be a fun way to meet new people since I'd been pretty out of the dating scene for a while. The catch? They pair you up randomly. So when the organizer called out my name, and then the name of the guy who'd be my partner for the next hour, I wasn't expecting much. Just another stranger I'd probably never see again. But then he showed up, and suddenly, the whole thing felt less like a game and more like a real challenge. His name was Luke. Tall, a little scruffy, with this intense look in his eyes that made me second-guess how well I could fake being confident. We shook hands, both a little nervous, and then the door slammed behind us, locking us in with nothing but cryptic clues and a ticking clock. Right from the start, the tension was thick. We had to work fast, and it turns out Luke was the kind of guy who doesn't just want to solve puzzles. He's a control freak about it, which is fine, except he didn't hesitate to dismiss my ideas. That's when the temperature in the room got warmer than it should have been for a place that's technically supposed to be a fun hangout. I tried to keep it cool, cracking jokes and tossing out theories about the riddles, but every time I did, he shot me a look that said, "Nope, not doing it your way." It felt less like teamwork and more like a subtle battle for who gets to call the shots. And honestly, it was frustrating as hell. But beneath that frustration, I couldn't help but notice how sharp he was, like he saw things I missed, how his mind worked differently. There was something magnetic about it, even if he was driving me a little crazy. Then, just as I was about to give up on the whole thing, something unexpected happened. We stumbled onto a clue together, one that neither of us would have cracked alone. The relief was instant, and for a brief moment, the ice between us melted. We were actually working as a team, and it felt kind of amazing. But of course, it couldn't stay that simple. Just as we're starting to sync up, the game throws a curveball, something that turns the room from a puzzle chamber into a pressure cooker. Luke's eyes hardened, and whatever lightness had come into the air snapped away. I realized then that this wasn't just about getting out of the room anymore. Something beneath the surface was stirring, and suddenly, the stakes felt a lot higher than just winning a game. I won't lie, I was scared. But maybe that's when things started to get interesting. The curveball came in the form of a locked box that suddenly slid out from the wall, like some mechanical surprise I didn't expect. It had no keyhole, just a series of buttons with strange symbols. Luke immediately went to it, his fingers twitching as if the box was daring him to crack it. I glanced at the timer on the wall. 15 minutes left. "This has to be it," he said without looking at me. "The final puzzle." I nodded, feeling the pressure squeeze my chest. We were so close, but the tension between us was like static. I wanted to ease it, but every idea I threw out was either ignored or met with a curt no. He was laser-focused, and I could tell he wasn't used to working with someone who challenged him. "So, what do you think the symbols mean?" I asked, leaning closer. Luke finally looked up. His expression softened for a second, like he was debating whether to include me or just keep doing it solo. "They're probably some kind of code. Maybe a sequence from the clues we found earlier?" I pulled out the crumpled note we uncovered half an hour ago, the one with coded letters and numbers. "What if it's a cipher? We tried the obvious stuff, but maybe we're missing a step." He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe the symbols correspond to letters, and the numbers tell us the order? Or maybe it's more about the pattern than the code." He smiled, a small, almost reluctant smile, and for a moment, the air between us shifted. "Not bad. Okay, let's try it." We started working side by side, quiet except for the occasional muttered guess. I could feel his breath close by, and something about it made my heart beat faster, though I tried to ignore it. It was like we were suddenly synced up in this little bubble, focused on the same goal, and I realized I didn't want the moment to end. When Luke finally pressed the last button, the box clicked open, revealing a small key inside. He held it up like it was a trophy and looked at me with a grin that was more genuine than anything I had seen since we got locked in. "We did it," he said. Yeah, together, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. Then came the part where things got really weird. Just as Luke reached for the door with the key, the room's lights flickered and dimmed. The timer suddenly jumped from 10 minutes to 5, like something reset itself. My heart nearly stopped. What the hell? I muttered. Luke's jaw clenched. Looks like the game's designed to mess with you when you think you've got it. I could see frustration building in his eyes. We don't have much time left. If we don't get out in 5 minutes, we lose. I swallowed hard. 5 minutes wasn't a lot. We can do this, I said, trying to sound confident, but inside I was freaking out. Luke nodded, but there was a tension in his shoulders that wasn't just about the game. I caught him staring at me for a beat longer than necessary, and I wondered if I was imagining it. We moved through the next sequence quickly, unlocking one small compartment after another. The puzzles got harder, and the pressure was relentless. At one point, Luke grabbed my arm to stop me from turning a dial the wrong way. His touch was firm, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of the warmth of his skin against mine. "Wait," he said quietly. "Let me." I stepped back, feeling a mix of disappointment and something else I couldn't quite name. But then he worked the dial with a skill and precision that was mesmerizing, and the lock clicked open. "Got it," he said, looking up at me with a small, pleased smile. I smiled back, genuinely impressed. "You're good at this." He shrugged, but there was a hint of pride in his eyes. "I'm not usually this competitive, but I wanted to make sure we got out." I blinked. That was unexpected. We kept going, racing against the clock. The final door was just a few clicks away from unlocking when Luke froze. "Wait," he said, his voice low. "We need to solve this last puzzle together." It was a code that required 2 people working at the same time on different consoles. We locked eyes, and for a second the room disappeared. The only thing that mattered was this moment. Us, side by side, hearts pounding, hands close but not quite touching. As we pressed the buttons in sync, the door clicked and swung open. Freedom. But instead of rushing out, we just stood there, catching our breath. The adrenaline was still running through me, but I realized something else was racing too, something I hadn't expected when I walked in here. Luke turned to me, a little smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Not bad for a first date, huh?" I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Yeah, not bad at all." And right then, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. We stepped out into the brightly lit lobby, the contrast from the dim, claustrophobic escape room almost dizzying. Other groups were milling about, celebrating their victories or lamenting their failures, but Luke and I just stood there, catching our breath and soaking in the moment. The game was over, but I could feel this weird energy hanging between us, something that wasn't just about the adrenaline. So I said, trying to break the silence, "How often do you do escape rooms?" Luke shrugged, running a hand through his hair like he was still trying to process everything that just happened. "Not that often. Honestly, I don't usually like doing stuff with strangers, but this was fun, in a weird way." I smiled, feeling a little bold. "Yeah, for me too." Honestly, I was a bit nervous about being paired up with a complete stranger. "But you kind of surprised me." He looked at me then, eyes sharp, but with a flicker of something softer. "Surprised you how?" "Like, you're not what I expected," I said. "You're intense, but also kind of charming. And surprisingly patient when you want to be." He chuckled, the sound warm and easy. "I'll take that as a compliment." We lingered there, neither of us in a hurry to leave, and then the escape room attendant came over, announcing that they had a little cafe attached next door. "You can grab a coffee or a drink on the house if you want. Celebrate your win." Luke glanced at me, and I felt a flicker of hope. "Coffee sounds good," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, let's do it." The cafe was cozy, with soft lighting and a few scattered tables. We found a corner spot and ordered 2 lattes. Sitting there across from him, I could finally relax a little. So I said, "What do you do when you're not solving puzzles and locking people in rooms?" Luke smiled, and I caught that same spark of warmth again. "I'm a graphic designer. Work mostly from home, which is nice, but it also gets lonely sometimes." I nodded, realizing I had asked a pretty standard question, but feeling like the answer was more honest than most first date small talk. "What about you?" he asked. I'm a copywriter for a tech startup, I said. Lots of deadlines and caffeine. Not nearly as exciting as graphic design, I'm guessing. He grinned. Don't sell yourself short. Words are powerful. There was a beat of silence, a comfortable kind that doesn't demand filling. Then Luke leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You know, I'm really glad we got paired up today. I wasn't expecting to connect with anyone in an escape room. I chuckled. Yeah, me neither. It's funny how situations like this can throw you together with someone who's completely different from your usual type. He nodded. Different can be good. I glanced at him, really looked at him for the first time outside the locked room. There was something genuine in his eyes, something that made me want to take a chance. So what happens now? I asked, trying to sound casual. Luke shrugged, but his smile was hopeful. I don't know. Maybe we exchange numbers? See if there's more to this than just a game. I felt my cheeks warm. Yeah, I'd like that. We pulled out our phones, fingers fumbling a bit as we swapped info. It felt awkward, but in a good way. Like the beginning of something new. When we finally stood up to leave, I felt a strange reluctance. The hour we spent locked together had cracked open something I hadn't expected. A connection that was equal parts thrilling and terrifying. As we walked out into the evening air, the city lights buzzing around us, Luke turned to me and said, Hey, next time, maybe we try something less stressful, like a movie or dinner. I smiled, heart beating a little faster. I'd like that. We parted ways at the corner, but instead of just fading into the night, we both glanced back, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. That escape room wasn't just a game anymore. It was the start of something, messy and complicated and maybe exactly what I needed. And honestly, I can't wait to see where it goes. The days after the escape room felt like the kind of buzz you get after a weird, intense concert, like your brain's still rewinding the experience, trying to make sense of it all. I kept replaying moments in my head, the way Luke's fingers moved over those puzzle buttons, the way that small smile appeared just when I thought he was too serious, the way our hands barely brushed as we worked together. It wasn't just the adrenaline talking. There was something else there, something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't ignore. We texted a bit over the next couple of days. Nothing heavy, just casual check-ins and jokes about how dramatic that last puzzle was. But every message made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. It's funny how texting someone new can feel like you're tiptoeing around a fragile glass. You want to say the right thing, but you're scared you'll shatter the moment. Luke suggested catching up again a few days later. Maybe dinner, he said, somewhere we don't have to escape from. I laughed and sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Sounds like a plan. When we met up, it was at this little Italian place a few blocks from my apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it had the kind of cozy vibe that made you want to settle in and stay a while. Luke was already there when I arrived, wearing a soft gray sweater that brought out the green in his eyes. I swear, I almost tripped over my words just greeting him. Hey, he said, smiling like he was genuinely happy to see me. That smile, the one that wasn't forced or polite but real, hit me harder than I expected. Hey, I managed, fighting the sudden nerves. We slid into a booth and ordered wine. Red, because why not? The conversation started slow, like we were feeling each other out after that wild first encounter. Luke talked about his latest design project, the deadlines that were stressing him out, and the weird inspiration he'd found in old movie posters. I shared a bit about work, the chaos of deadlines and copy rewrites, and my recent binge on true crime podcasts. But then things got more personal. Luke mentioned how he'd been hesitant about dating lately, how past relationships had left him cautious. I nodded, relating more than I thought I would. Yeah, I said, swirling the wine in my glass. I get that. It's hard to open up when you've been burned before. He looked down at his glass, then back up at me. But sometimes the risk is worth it. There it was again, the underlying tension, not just close-nessual, but emotional. Like we were both tiptoeing around feelings that were new and maybe a little scary. Over dinner, the walls started to come down. We laughed over shared stories, teased each other about terrible dating experiences, and even argued over which 90s boy band was superior. He was Team Backstreet Boys. I was firmly NSYNC. It felt natural, like we'd known each other longer than a few days. At one point, Luke reached across the table and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear. It was a small gesture, but it sent a jolt straight through me. I caught his eye, and there was this flicker of something. Want, maybe? Or just nervousness. I couldn't tell. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. All the time, I admitted. "But I'm also trying not to get ahead of myself." He smiled softly. "Same here." After dinner, we walked together through the quiet streets, the city lights casting long shadows. It was the kind of night that felt like it belonged in a movie, the kind where anything could happen. Luke stopped under a street lamp and looked at me. "Want to come up for a drink?" he asked. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part was cautious. This wasn't just about drinks. It was about figuring out if this could be something real. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'd like that." His place was a few blocks away, a cozy apartment filled with books and art supplies, the kind of space that felt lived in but inviting. We settled on the couch with 2 glasses of whiskey, and the conversation slowed, more intimate, more honest. He talked about the things he'd never told anyone, the insecurities hidden beneath that confident exterior, the fears about being vulnerable. I shared some of mine, about feeling invisible in a world that moves too fast, and the loneliness that creeps in when you least expect it. At some point, our hands found each other, fingers intertwining naturally. It felt easy, like a quiet promise. "I'm glad we got stuck in that escape room together," Luke said softly, eyes searching mine. "Me too," I replied, leaning in just a little. The moment hung between us, fragile and full of possibility. And when our lips finally met, it wasn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It was simple, real, and exactly what I needed. Later, as we lay tangled together, I thought about how strange it was that a game designed to trap you could actually set you free. Maybe sometimes the best way to find a way out is to get a little lost with someone else. And with Luke, I felt like I was starting to find my way. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting warm stripes across the room. I woke up still tangled in the sheets, and the quiet, comforting weight of Luke beside me. For a few seconds, I just lay there, letting myself soak in the feeling. The kind of peacefulness that only comes when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Luke stirred, blinking awake, and offering me that easy smile again. I couldn't help but grin back, the kind of grin that's too sincere to fake. "Morning," he said, voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, stretching and feeling a bit more human than I had in weeks. It was strange how quickly intimacy could sneak up on you, especially when you least expected it. The night before felt like the start of something raw and real, but mornings always had a way of bringing clarity, and sometimes complications. As we got up, grabbing coffee in his kitchen, the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the calm after a storm, a quiet space where we both could just be. "So," Luke said, stirring his mug. "What now?" I shrugged, biting my lip. "I don't know. I guess we figure it out, one day at a time." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Sounds good to me." But as much as I wanted to believe that simple answer was enough, there was a knot in my stomach, a mix of excitement and nerves about what this might actually mean going forward. We spent the day wandering around the city, grabbing lunch at a little taco place, and people watching in the park. It was easy to be with him, like the puzzles and adrenaline from the escape room had faded into the background, leaving just 2 guys figuring each other out. At one point, Luke reached over and grabbed my hand, entwining our fingers. I squeezed back, surprised by how natural it felt. When I glanced at him, he caught my eye and nodded, as if to say, "I'm here." That simple gesture meant more than words. But later, as we sat on a bench watching the sun start to dip, the conversation took a more serious turn. "Do you ever worry about how fast this is moving?" I asked, suddenly nervous. Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah. I mean, it's not like I'm some expert at relationships, but I'm trying not to overthink it." I laughed softly. "Same. I usually screw things up by overthinking." He smiled, but then got quiet for a moment. "There's something I want to be honest about." My heart skipped. "What is it?" Luke hesitated, then said, "I've been through some rough stuff recently." A breakup that left me pretty guarded. I'm still figuring out how to trust again. I felt a lump in my throat, wanting to reach out and tell him I understood more than he knew. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "I've been there too, more times than I can count." He looked at me, vulnerability shining through. "Does this freak you out?" "Us, I mean." I thought about it. Yeah, the idea of opening up again was scary. But the alternative, closing myself off, was even scarier. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't freak me out. Not if we're honest about it." Luke's smile returned, softer this time. Good. Because I want to see where this goes. That night, back at my place, I found myself thinking about how much easier it felt to be vulnerable with him. With Luke, I didn't have to hide the parts of myself I usually bury deep. We texted late into the night, the conversation flowing effortlessly until we both finally said goodnight. Over the next few weeks, we settled into this strange, wonderful rhythm. There were dates filled with laughter and easy conversation, long walks where we shared bits of our pasts, and quiet moments where just being near each other was enough. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Luke's tendency to take control sometimes clashed with my more laid-back approach. We argued a few times, mostly about small things that felt bigger in the moment, but every time we found a way back to understanding. One evening, after a particularly tense disagreement about plans for the weekend, I thought maybe this was too complicated, too much. But then Luke showed up at my door with a peace offering, a small bouquet of wildflowers, and that same sheepish grin. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't want to fight." "I don't either," I replied, pulling him inside. We talked it out, really talked, and when we finally kissed, it was a promise to keep trying, even when it got hard. Looking back, I realized that Escape Room was more than just a game or a quirky first date. It was a microcosm of everything we'd faced together, the challenges, the frustrations, the breakthroughs. And the thing is, I don't regret a single moment. Because with Luke, I'm learning that sometimes the best way to escape the past is to face it head on, with someone who's willing to run the maze with you. It's messy, it's imperfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like more than enough. A few weeks into whatever this was turning into, I started noticing the little things about Luke, the way he'd furrow his brow when he was thinking hard, how he always had this slight hesitation before he said something personal, like he was weighing the weight of every word. It was the kind of stuff you don't really catch on a first date, but becomes impossible to miss once you care. One Friday night, we were curled up on my couch, a crime documentary playing quietly on the TV, but neither of us really watching. Luke was tracing lazy circles on the back of my hand, and I felt that familiar buzz of comfort mixed with something deeper. "I never thought I'd be this open with someone I just met," he said softly, breaking the silence. I shifted to face him, fingers still entwined with his. "Me neither. But here we are." He chuckled a little breathy, then grew serious. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you." My heart jumped a beat. "Yeah?" Luke took a deep breath, biting his lip like he was about to rewire a puzzle in his head before solving it. "It's about why I'm a control freak when it comes to things like the escape room," he said finally. "I have this thing with anxiety. It's been a constant battle. Controlling the puzzles, the environment, it's how I manage that." I nodded, suddenly appreciating the intensity I'd felt from him in a whole new light. "That makes so much sense," I said. "I can see how needing control would be a way to feel safe." Luke looked relieved, like a weight had lifted. "Yeah, and honestly, opening up about it is scary. But with you, it feels different." "Different good or different scary?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "Definitely different good," he said, smiling. We sat there for a while, hands linked, sharing pieces of ourselves that didn't always come easy to say aloud. I realized then how much trust was building between us. Not the flashy kind, but the slow, steady kind that's harder to find and even harder to keep. A few days later, Luke invited me to his place for dinner. It was casual, but there was a quiet excitement in the air, like we both knew tonight meant something. He cooked some kind of spicy pasta that filled his apartment with a delicious aroma. We ate at his tiny kitchen table, trading stories about our childhoods, our families, the awkward phases we'd both survived. The more he talked, the more I saw the layers beneath the guy who'd seemed so guarded when we met. After dinner, we moved to the couch, and Luke pulled me close. His hands were warm, steady, and the way he looked at me made my stomach do flip-flops. "I want you to meet someone," he said suddenly. I blinked. "Oh?" "Who?" "My roommate, Jamie," he said, a hint of nervousness creeping in. I nodded, trying to stay cool. "Sure. When?" "Tomorrow evening. He's really chill. I think you'll like him." It was unexpected, sure. Meeting a roommate so early felt like a big step, but I could tell it mattered to Luke. So I agreed. The next night, I found myself standing awkwardly in Luke's living room as Jamie bounced around, greeting me with an easy grin and a loud, "So you're the guy who trapped Luke in that escape room, huh?" We laughed, and the evening unfolded with surprising ease. Jamie was a breath of fresh air, funny, open, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. Watching Luke relax around his roommate was a new side of him I hadn't seen, and it made me feel like I was stepping deeper into his world. As Jamie left, Luke and I stood by the door. The moment was quieter now, the buzz of the night settling into something softer. "Thanks for coming," Luke said, pulling me close. "No problem." "He's great." Luke smiled, his fingers brushing my cheek. "I know. And so are you." That night, as we lay tangled together, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come, from strangers trapped in a puzzle-filled room to something real and complicated and worth fighting for. But with all progress came new questions. Like how to balance ourselves with the people around us, how to keep the trust growing without smothering it, and how to face the inevitable bumps that would come. One morning, a few days later, Luke showed up at my door looking more serious than usual. "Can we talk?" he asked. I gestured inside. "Of course." He sat down, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "Jamie and I have been talking," he started, "and there's something I haven't been honest about." My gut tightened. "What is it?" Luke looked up, eyes steady but vulnerable. "Jamie's been feeling a little left out. He's not exactly thrilled about me dating someone. It's complicated." I blinked, processing the news. "Wow, that's a lot." Luke nodded. "Yeah, and I don't want to hurt either of you, but I also don't want to lose what we have." We talked for hours that night, navigating the tangled mess of feelings, boundaries, and expectations. It wasn't easy, and it definitely wasn't perfect, but it was real. The next few weeks tested us in ways I hadn't imagined. There were awkward dinners with Jamie, tense conversations about space and time, and moments when I wondered if maybe I'd been naive to think this could work. But through it all, Luke and I kept coming back to each other. We learned to communicate better, to listen when things got hard, and to hold on to the parts of us that mattered most. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Luke pulled me into a tight hug. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "I want you to know I'm in this with you." I looked up at him, heart full. Me too. And in that moment, with the city lights sparkling outside his window, I realized that love, like any great escape room, was complicated, messy, and sometimes downright frustrating. But if you're lucky, it's also worth every twist and turn. Months passed, and the tangled web of our little trio, Luke, Jamie, and me, slowly unraveled into something manageable. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I wondered if we'd all find a way to coexist without anyone feeling sidelined, but those moments taught me a lot about patience and compromise. More importantly, they showed me how honest conversations and small gestures could mend awkwardness and forge new connections. Luke and I grew stronger together, learning to accept each other's flaws and anxieties without judgment. His need for control softened when he trusted me a little more, and my laid-back nature gained a bit of grounding from his focus. We became a team not just in escape rooms but in life. One rainy Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves back at the same escape room that had brought us together. This time, not as strangers paired by chance, but as a trio who'd weathered challenges off the clock. The puzzles felt familiar, but this time, the tension that once defined us was replaced by laughter and shared glances. When we finally unlocked the final door, Luke turned to me with that same small smile, the one that made my chest tighten in the best way. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked. I grinned, squeezing his hand. "With you? Always." Later, as we sat in a nearby cafe, sipping warm drinks and watching the city blur outside the windows, I thought about how unexpected this journey had been. From awkward strangers thrown together in a locked room, to partners navigating the messy, beautiful complexities of a real relationship. It wasn't a fairy tale, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Looking at Luke, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the puzzles that forced us to work together, for the vulnerabilities we shared, and for the quiet moments that made everything worthwhile. Life, like any good escape room, throws surprises at you. But sometimes those surprises lead you exactly where you need to be. And with Luke by my side, I finally believe that getting lost might be the best way to find your way home.